Welcome and thank you for joining me today on the Turtle Optimist podcast. My name is Jenny. Today's topic will be focused on someone who became Teacher of the Year, what she learned, and the impact on her career. Welcome, Dana. Would you mind introducing yourself and letting us know who you are?
Yes, hi there. So my name is Dana. My name sign is D on my chin. I'm currently the Curriculum and Assessment Coordinator at Washington School for the Deaf in Vancouver, Washington. Um, Let me see what I can say about myself. So my upbringing, I used to go to WSD myself as a student. I graduated from there. So I have a pretty long history with WSD. Not only that, but my mom also taught math there as well for 25 years. So it feels like I'm a little bit continuing in her footsteps and her legacy. So that's basically it.
Thank you for sharing. In 2023, you were one of the teachers who were selected as Teacher of the Year, representing the state of Washington. For people who may not be familiar with that, please share what is included in the following year after selection and how long was that process?
So I laugh a little bit because I had no idea myself what I was getting into at the time. Basically, I received an email and they congratulated me on being nominated to become, now at the time it was just Regional Teacher of the Year. So there were 9 school districts in the area that were considered. Well, yeah. So I was nominated for that district and I saw the email and teaching, I'm busy. I didn't have a whole lot of time. So to read through all of it, I just thought it was spam. I deleted it at the time. And then I got another email. Deleted it again. Principal came up to me and said, "Hey, did you get that email?" And that's when I realized it was a real thing. But, I was overwhelmed. I was busy, just like any other teacher. My priorities were not about awards and recognition, but that was a little bit of my mistake. And the people who had nominated me said, please pursue this. I talked to my mom, who's a teacher, as I just mentioned, and she said, yes, go for it. So I felt a little bit like I was doing it for her. I set a time limit for myself. As a teacher, I want to have a healthy boundary. I put myself, I can't remember, I think it was maybe a 2-hour time limit to complete the process. And so I wrote up what I needed to write up, sent it along, and then I was selected as the regional teacher and then selected as Washington State. And it's been a ride ever since. It's been a great experience.
Awesome. So, how long was the appointment? 1 year or 9 months?
The entire process, well, say a year and a half. Well, it was a little bit more than a year and a half. Between starting the application, the interviews, all of that. We also had a mock press experience where you have to answer some rapid fire questions and then being selected. It was quite a bit. So by the time we wrapped up, there was a few interviews left. It was a pretty lengthy process. So if anybody does apply and pursues this, make sure that they're mentally prepared for about 2 years worth of work.
That is a long time. Thank you for sharing. During prior conversation, you mentioned discovering that the assumption of hearing teachers possessing more knowledge than deaf or hard of hearing teachers was false. Can you elaborate on the experiences or observations that led you to this realization? And what impact did this have on your perspective as a deaf teacher?
Yeah, so really it started with myself as a deaf person, as a deaf child, and I was born in the time period where um, people were just starting to realize with oralism and the oral education approach, which is when my mom grew up. So this basically means that kids were not allowed to sign. Teachers would only allow speaking and would only be speaking to the children. I would say 99.9% of admin in deaf schools were hearing. So that in itself sends the message of hearing people being superior to deaf people, right? So I was born that at a time of where they were shifting to this approach of total communication, which basically means kind of throw it all at the kid and see what sticks. So using the word total, it could be PSC, it could be C, it could be ASL, it could be SimComming, just kind of seeing what works for them. So it was messy, but the buy-in from parents was good. And my parent, realizing that signing was necessary. I was born at that time. It was still dominated by hearing people. I did not really have many deaf role models at the time, but it did make me think like, okay, hearing people must be better than deaf people in some way. So my senior year, in high school, I wanted to take a couple classes at a public school, so I took two. One of them was an art elective of calligraphy. I was just curious to take that, and the second one was English. Now they had five different levels of English being offered, and at first I said I need to be in the most basic, the lowest level of English. As a senior, I thought that my English was no good. I was getting all of these kind of covert messages of that through the years. But then the teacher recognized just not just me, there was five deaf students from my class, recognized that all of us needed to really be moved up to the highest level, the honors level. We were all kind of denying it at the time, but we realized we thought we needed that most basic level because we were given that message covertly over the years. So I moved over to honors English and I realized, oh, okay, so that was really an eye-opening experience for me because I was really similar level wise to my hearing peers. And, becoming a teacher, I still had that thought of public schools being better than deaf schools until I got to the Teacher of the Year experience. I met all of these other teachers and realized we shared the same insecurities. We shared the same feelings of like imposter syndrome. We don't even know what we're doing. You don't know either. Great. And so that was a really good like aha moment and eye-opening experience for me.
That's great. You had shared with me, you spoke about internal expectations impacting your well-being as a teacher. Can you give specific examples of these expectations and how they manifested in your daily work?
Yeah, so this has speaks to my personality because of the nature of teaching itself. It already has that built-in high expectation. So really, I see teaching as the second most important job on earth. First being parenting, second being a teacher. You're taking care of other people's kids all day and want to make sure you're doing a good job. So you have that responsibility inherently, but it's also kind of part of my type A personality. It's just how I was. And I would say I had several situations, but one I specifically remember. I had a nanny who would take care of my kids at home, and I was teaching at the time. And she wanted to host a surprise birthday party with my kids, and she ended up doing it at school in my classroom, which is fine. I loved it was a very sweet surprise, but it did make me realize, oh, is that how my kids see me as a teacher first or a mother first? So it made me feel like I needed to step back and strike that balance. It really was an aha moment for me.
I'm curious, how did those internal expectations affect your mental health, your energy levels, and even physically? What were some of the warning signs that you noticed?
Yeah. So I became quite overweight and started having some health issues appear, arthritis, some back pain. And it wasn't until 2020, we all remember 2020, staying at home. One of my friends had what they're calling white coat anxiety. She was a little bit scared of going to the doctor. We made a pact that we would both go. When I went is when I really realized how bad my health was getting. They said I was pre-diabetic, that I had high cholesterol, that I was basically a walking heart attack with the numbers that were coming back, arthritis, a lot of these issues. And I just realized like I am only in my mid 40s at the time. What am I doing to myself? It just felt like I was dying a slow death, and the only person to blame was myself. I could try to blame my school, but I really can't. I had to take accountability at that time, changed my eating habits, my lifestyle, and was able to manage my time better. I was at home more. And so that was when I made the change and things got better.
That's good. I'm happy to hear that. I wonder if by changing your work schedule, did you have any pushback from the school or any kind of negative reaction?
It's kind of that's the funny part. No one really noticed. So, of course, I lost weight. Yay for that, I suppose. But no one was like, "Hey, you're not working enough." No one said anything about that. So, right, it was more of an internal expectation I had imposed upon myself, and it really was all me. At the same time, now that my role has changed, I'm realizing now that it does help if you have admin support and admin buy-in, telling people, you know, go home, have this boundary. I think I would have appreciated that if I had received that message as a teacher from my admin at the time. It's almost like being given permission to go home. It would have been nice if that could have been done.
Yeah. Many teachers struggle with setting boundaries. What advice would you give to teachers who are trying to establish healthier boundaries between their professional and personal lives?
Hmm. I feel guilty because I'm really not the best example of this, but at the same time, when I work late, I know that it sends a message to other people of they would then feel like they need to work late and they feel guilty, but I'm always make sure to communicate that with people where I say, I know, I have to go home. I'm going home soon, so that they receive that message from me and we can support one another in that way. I mentor some teachers, and so I do try to tell them, leave your laptop at work. That's really important. Leave it at work, including weekends. Just leave it there. I know it's not easy sometimes, but it's really important. Tell people, even if you have to work late, for me, I'm more productive in the evenings. On Fridays, we finish at 2 o'clock and then it's time to go home. So that's one thing. Another thing is to just remind them over and over to take care of themselves, go home. Even if you tell them what feels like every day, it seems like a small thing, but it is meaningful. And really, what helped me realize that I needed to figure this out is when my mother had a stroke. I found out I was driving to school. Someone called me and told me that she had had a stroke, and I was like, I thought that was it. She was not able to communicate. She lost control of the right side of her body from the stroke, and the first thing that came to my mind was that I wish I had spent more time with her, and that really helped me step back and make time for other people on the weekends and all of that.
You had mentioned you transitioned from a teaching role to an administrative one. How has this shift in perspective influenced your understanding of the challenges teachers face, particularly regarding work life balance?
Yeah, one of the biggest internal mantras for me that I try to keep in mind for myself is don't forget what it's like to be a teacher. I mean, honestly, I think often when we leave the classroom, you become disconnected from that and you forget what it's like. I never want to get to that point. So that's one thing for me. Another thing I've noticed is that even though my role currently is challenging, so I'm responsible for my classroom as well as for K through 12 teachers, I cannot afford to mess up with this great responsibility. The burden is quite high, but it's still really different. I'm able to turn my brain off when I go home now, and a lot of times teachers cannot, and that is such a huge difference. That in itself feels different stress-wise. I'm way less stressed, even though the responsibility is greater, but the stress level is lower, which is quite interesting. So it's something we just need to remind ourselves in admin to remember to be more gracious about our teachers' time and figure out how we can reduce their workload so that they don't have to bring it home.
Right. Those are really good tips for people who transition to admin roles. That's great. What strategies do you now use in your administrative role to support teachers in maintaining a healthy balance? Are there any specific programs or initiatives you've implemented?
We don't have any programs, but we do have strategies we employ. I really push back to figure out how to not have as many meetings, reduce the number of meetings, and trying to figure out, in a perfect world, all teachers would have two prep periods. One is just not enough with email nowadays. Just keeping up with that takes up easily 30 to 40 minutes of your time, which only leaves you about 20 for actual prep. Def ed is also considered special ed, which means that IEPs are involved, which takes a lot more time. It is part of our teaching responsibilities, but it's also outside of the standards of a teaching role. So it's a lot, and it's really about figuring out how to give teachers more time. We have a lot more time for them to plan on Fridays. We used to do professional development a lot, but now we've reduced that. So it's these little strategies. One thing I really, really want to do is that, we have specific criteria when we develop PD, professional development, but I really want at least one session per year to focus on self-care. And I'm gonna harp on the idea of having two prep periods. I think it's so important. It is difficult, but we're trying.
You have the unique experience of traveling the country as Teacher of the Year. So I'm curious if you observed any common themes or struggles among teachers in different regions regarding expectations and balance.
So I have a few things I want to mention with this. I'm so fortunate to work with amazing administrators. They really recognized the responsibilities, the stress level, and tried to make sure that my work culture was as healthy as possible. So I'm very fortunate. I met some other teachers who were really struggling with that and had a rough time. One of the experiences that I'll never forget from DC, part of the Teacher of the Year tour, we had an international summit on teaching professions, ISTP, that we were able to attend. They discussed, it was all these different countries that came together, kind of like the UN, sitting at a U-shaped table. Jill Biden was there, gave remarks with the Secretary of Education. He was there as well. There was a lot of people there. And so there was teachers and then UN representatives, and people would come up from all these different countries. I took all of these notes that day, and they were all convening to discuss issues that they were experiencing from all over the world. So of course I was curious about this. I was shocked to see that we had a lot of common issues. Four of them I made note of specifically. First being a teacher shortage. So that's not just a US problem. And I'm talking about countries like Finland, which are known to have some of the best systems in the world. So they're having a teacher shortage. Even China mentioned it as well. So teacher shortage. The second one, lack of respect for the profession. A lot of times teachers are seen as kind of babysitters. The third issue being that compensation needs to be raised. Fortunately, Washington state is probably third or fourth in the US for pay, but a lot of states do not pay well. Teachers need second jobs, things like that. And then the fourth one is that working conditions need to improve. Less working hours, more prep time, more autonomy. Luckily, WSD is pretty good for that, but more autonomy generally, more support staff, smaller class sizes, more training, redesigned curriculum. I did not realize it was international and not just the US. So that was really fascinating.
Seems like a really great opportunity for you to attend that summit that you learned and have stayed with you. What message do you hope listeners, especially teachers, take away from your story about internal expectations and the importance of boundaries?
First, when I thought about doing this podcast, I was like, the last thing I want is to scare away potential teachers. So teaching is one of the most rewarding jobs. I hope that even though it's challenging, but that it gives back so much. Like I said before, teaching, I really feel like is one of the most important jobs besides parenting, honestly. So we need teachers. I have some notes of like really what makes this job so amazing. Firstly, it's never a dull moment, which is perfect for me. I love when things are constantly changing and hard to predict. I love a routine, but I also love having new things pop up from time to time. Secondly, is relationships, both with the teachers and the students. You have lifelong friends with your colleagues. And then I love when the students after graduation come back and you can see how they're doing. It's great to see them always. I also, though, have to say that teaching is not for the faint of heart. You need grit, you need patience, you need love for teaching and for the students. Now, that aside, how to make sure that you strike a good balance and have good boundaries, you have to be generous with yourself, be kind to yourself. You can only do so much. I always say give 50%, but really we give 60%. Don't give 100% of yourself. Try to find that balance, but also make sure you let other people do their part. Don't try to do it all. When we're working and when we're really into something, it's hard to go down that rabbit hole and just get sucked into what we're working on. But I always try to tell myself like, okay, I have 45 minutes to do a thing, whatever the thing is. Don't overthink this, just do it in 45 minutes. If I have time at the end to do some edits and make it better at the end of that 45, but I have to set time limits for myself.
Awesome. I'm curious your perspective on what is the power of balance? What does that mean for you and your life? How does it affect teachers and students?
For me, the power of balance is that you will be happier and you will have a more positive impact on your students. It really starts with you and it is a trickle down effect. So if I'm happy, they will be happier and the students will feel that they can learn in these environments. I always say that learning happens in a safe environment and one that is comfortable and warm and people feel like they can succeed. So it starts with the teachers.
That's great. The last question I have is, what are some practical steps a teacher can take today to start setting boundaries or better boundaries?
Yeah. So firstly, leave, I'm going to repeat this, leave your laptop at work. Even if you have to make a banner for yourself as a reminder, leave it at work. Remind yourself of your humanity. We are human. We're not machines. Also set time limits on your tasks. It's so easy to just lose yourself and lose track of time and what you're doing. It's important to me because over the years, I've had to do this. Remind yourself at the end of the day what really matters, your relationships that you maintain at work or outside of work. Usually the answer to that is outside of work. So, I've seen people come and go at WSD. Once someone leaves, we replace them in their position. It sounds kind of cruel, but people forget and move on. So at home, that's not the case. Someone leaves and that's a permanent loss and they cannot be replaced. So I always have to just tell myself to maintain those relationships outside of work, even though, of course, we make awesome friends at work. But we have to remind ourselves that at the end of the day, we really have to maintain our relationships outside of work.
That is beautiful and great advice. A huge thank you to Dana for sharing such valuable insights and practical advice. I hope this episode has left you feeling empowered to take control of your own well being. Remember those small steps we talked about. Maybe it's setting a firmer boundary with an email or carving out time for a relaxing activity. Whatever it is, start small, be kind to yourself, and celebrate your progress. Because when teachers thrive, students thrive. Until next time, take care.